This week on Head to Head, big news for the second Rise of Skywalker trailer.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this podcast. So the time is coming where I'm getting really close to finishing up Thrawn Alliances.
Okay, cool.
So that's like the second book in the whole, new Thrawn trilogy that came out, because recently we just saw the release of, let me get this right now, Thrawn Treason.
Yes, it's treason then.
Because what was I always calling it? Betrayal or something?
Yeah, betrayal.
Or something like that. So
it's funny because there was actually like a whole spoof on that. Like people kept screwing the name up, so you weren't the only one. So
really?
Yeah. So people kept calling it, and so of course they kept inserting the whole Palpatine. It's treason then.
Oh,
it was a whole joke that they kept doing. Like,
I didn't even know about that. That's kind of cool. So yeah, Betrayal was released, and it's getting some really good early buzz as far as like how it fits into the story, and because it is the final book of this trilogy. So, and there's this really really cool story arc that's happening.
Okay.
So I mean, at some point, I would highly recommend you actually read Thrawn and then Alliances, and then, so you can hop in and maybe we can do a review. I might do a blog post on it. Time is becoming shorter and shorter these days because of my job, but I really would like to actually do like at least some little blog on this, because I really think that Thrawn Alliances is a really big step up from the first one, even though I love the first one. I think that this one, because you get the whole relationship between, it actually jumps back and forth between Anakin and Thrawn and then Vader and Thrawn. So they kind of have to, it's almost like Vader and Thrawn end up going on this mission that deals with a lot of the same elements and the same planet from a prior mission that Anakin and Thrawn did.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of cool. First
almost
of
like
all,
a juxtaposition type thing.
Yeah. And it's great because, this is like something that we've always wanted to see, Thrawn and Vader interacting. But the bonus is you get Thrawn and Anakin and even Thrawn and Padme interacting.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's really interesting, especially because Thrawn ends up, like Vader comes close to just wanting to kill him several times. But he knows he can't because the Emperor trusts him. And, he's kind of... It would almost like he would get in trouble with the Emperor if he does, and Thrawn's just being himself, basically, so it's really funny, how that whole thing works out. But if you guys haven't had a chance, I'll tell you what, we'll drop a Amazon affiliate link in the description, in the show notes, and then you guys can actually maybe check it out. I'll actually do it for all three books, because you guys really should be jumping in on this Thrawn series. It's really good. But I think it's time to put down the books and pick up the glass.
Yes, time to wet the whistle.
Yep, time to go to the Cantina. So what do we got first in the wonderful little Cantina?
All right, man. Well, Bloomberg reports that...
Say that 3 times
fast.
Yeah,
I know, man. The Bloomberg reports.
I won't make you do it again.
No, I can't.
The Bloomberg reports.
Yes, thank you. Says that Star Wars, the new trilogy of Star Wars, is not connecting with fans, the younger fans at least.
That's interesting.
So a lot of things that they've basically said, like toy sales are down. There's not like a whole lot of merchandise that's being bought up for the new band of movies that come out, including, even some of the movies as far as like Solo, of course, we know was a kind of a disappointment because they actually lost money on that. And then not Return of the Jedi, but The Last Jedi didn't make as much as they had anticipated. So there are a lot of things they're saying.
You're talking about like as far as the toys go.
The toys and everything like that, yeah. And then a lot of things that are not resonating with the younger generation, such as Galaxy's Edge.
Well, I mean, the Galaxy's Edge thing's a little bit different, though, because it's a little bit misleading. Because, there's a lot of reports out there saying that Galaxy's Edge is kind of a flop, but that's not even true anyway, because number one, the biggest problem with Galaxy's Edge is the ticket prices.
Yeah, that's the one big thing.
That was one big thing. And the other thing is they really haven't fully opened it yet. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, they've only opened like certain sections and there's certain things. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that go into that.
Yeah, because according to the reports and things that I've heard, like Bob Iger was like, okay, because there was such anticipation for Galaxy's Edge that they were going to build this whole reservoir because they were just expecting this whole onslaught of people, and they were actually having to like build extra stuff just to contain the folks. And then, of course, once it opened, they didn't get the response. And then even they've even said some things like there aren't a lot of things that are children centric, such as like, okay, of course you got the Cantina where they got adult drinks that I just spilled on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. You're just dropping things already. You haven't even had your second sip yet.
I know.
Gotta slow down.
Sorry, I'm a bit anxious.
Well, no, you're right, though. I mean, that was another point I was going to bring up, too, is that if you look at maybe The Force Awakens, this isn't necessarily true, but particularly with The Last Jedi, I would even say Rogue One. Mm-hmm. Maybe Solo, but probably not. Force Awakens and Solo, I think, had more of an adventure, kind of like classic Star Wars feel to it.
Right.
Which, as we know, Lucas was actually marketing toward kids. The whole focus was supposed to be kids. Mm-hmm. The problem is that first generation, which included me, it's kind of like we're going to see new Star Wars movies now. Well, they were made for somebody like me back then. They're not made for me now. Mm-hmm. So it was a problem that Lucas, I don't think himself really anticipated, and that is that, he made these things for kids, but yet the kids are all in their 40s now.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, now you got to make it for the original fans. Then you have to make it for maybe the more middle-tiered fans like you did, who actually came to it a little bit later, later on or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then you also have the younger fans. And even then, you got like 7-year-olds all the way up to like 18. It's like they're going to have
a different.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that the original trilogy, I think, successfully did that I'm not so sure it's been 100% repeated, except maybe closely with the Marvel stuff. But I don't really count that simply because Marvel had source material. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the first thing that Lucas was able to do was appeal to all generations. He came up with a trilogy that whether you were 7, 18, or 40, you actually were like, man, I love this.
Yeah.
This is like the greatest thing ever. And I think that that's something they're not really doing now. They're almost trying to make it, it's
like they're focusing on one particular group and not
either that or
spectrum.
Multiple groups. I mean, what they could do is because look, if they're going to still make movies let's just say that because I know that, a long time ago
in the galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, well, after The Last Jedi, even though that made a lot of money, it was probably Solo. They said, well, maybe we're not going to do any standalone movies for a while. That's led to speculation that maybe they're just going to slow down the movie franchise. So what ends up happening is now you have to like pick and choose what movies you're going to do. But if they kept up, let's say Solo was wildly successful, mm-hmm. What they could have done was then just release 2, even 3 movies a year, but have each one have like different themes or, maybe something along the lines of a particular genre. Like how The Mandalorian is kind of like an Old West sort of vibe, mm-hmm.
So you mean like have something that's kind of catered more towards the younger kids, have something that's more catered towards the older crowd?
Sure. They're successfully doing this in television right now. They got Star Wars Resistance that's completely made for younger kids, but adults can find enjoyment out of it. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they had The Mandalorian, which is definitely focused more towards adults.
Right.
But see, you could get away with that more with TV because, you have this whole schedule and, you got all these episodes and everything, whereas a movie is kind of a special thing and it's in a theater for a limited period of time. Mm-hmm. And so you have to try to get the biggest audience you can.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I personally don't think that that's 100% accurate as far as Well, I mean, granted, whatever, metrics they're using to measure all this, I'm sure is fine. It's just, I think they're not looking at the bigger picture, though.
Well, I mean, like, I honestly don't even see, like, commercials for any of this stuff. I don't see a lot of
exactly. Like,
what I'm saying, like the marketing.
Used to be like commercial, even with the prequels.
Yeah,
there used to be commercials for the toys.
Exactly, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like, as far as the marketing, that's where I see it is like they're not marketing things towards kids, or they don't have like, okay, maybe if you're not going to market, Captain Phasma, whatever, but you might. Want to have something like, okay, you can look like Rey, and with this new live action, whatever.
Oh, yeah, right.
You can have, if you want to be a stormtrooper like Finn, and you can run around with this blood, something. They had stuff that,
exactly,
was catered towards kids, and it kind of made them involved into the world of Star Wars.
Well, here's what was always funny, and you probably came in on some of this as well, is the fact that, you would actually sit there with, say, some toys that you had, and they would have a commercial for like some new playset or something that comes out. And the thing that's funny is the kids in the commercials have like 20 stormtrooper figures, and
right.
No kid in the world had that many. It's like you had 2.
Right.
Or maybe you had one of each. Maybe, you had like a stormtrooper, a biker scout, a snow trooper. That's what I had. Right.
You just had to pretend that you had a whole legion with you.
Yeah, exactly. But, in the commercials, they're sitting there with this entire legion of, figures, and they have all these ships and all this stuff. And, of course, they're reenacting the movie. How am I going to reenact the Battle of Hoth with like one rebel, one stormtrooper?
Han Solo and...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had the Hoth playset. I actually had an AT-AT.
Yeah, I remember you told me that.
Yeah, I was like $50, which back then is like, $250 now or something, or maybe more. It's like, because, I mean, people just weren't, and the dollar was a little bit stronger, things, just the way the economy was.
Yeah. So
that was a lot of money. But, that's the thing. It's like back then you would see these commercials, you would see stuff like this, and, that's a good point. You don't really see anything advertised anymore.
Nope.
Star Wars related. They don't have any commercials where like kids are reenacting things from the movie, like you said, dressed up as a character in a costume, and buy this new lightsaber.
Yeah, man, I remember one day I walked into Toys R Us and I saw something that was actually kind of cool. I mean, I felt a bit ashamed that I actually wanted to purchase it, but it was like a glove that was basically like magnetized, but whatever it was supposed to, whatever like little objects that you had with it had the magnet inside it, so you could pretend like you had the Force, so you would switch it on and it would fly to your hand. I was like, man, I wish I would have had that as a kid, because I mean, that up.
Some of the toys that they came out with, particularly the prequel era stuff, was like this next generation stuff, and it was like, when I was a kid, the lightsaber they had
foam. Oh, it's like a little foam.
It was a flashlight, and that was painted. And then you actually blew up, kind of like a beach ball type material. You blew up the blade and then stuck it in there.
Wow.
Like attached it. And that was a lightsaber. And that was a big deal, because when you shone the flashlight, it would illuminate the blow up blade.
Yeah, and it's like the color of whatever.
Yeah, but you couldn't fight with it.
Yeah, because see, for me growing up, when they did re-release re-release the toys, and they actually had like foam lightsabers.
Yeah.
Where like the blade is like a foam thing or whatever. And then eventually it got into like the whole plastic stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
and
now
of
some of
course
the
they
stuff
had
now.
The stuff that has like the sound effects built in and all that. And, now they've got, well, and that's another thing. They're marketing these things to adults. Like they have that build your own lightsaber thing at Galaxy's Edge, and it, or some of these other, like they actually had lightsabers that you can buy, but you had to wear like laser goggles because it was totally dangerous to look at them. Mm-hmm. So it's just, these are the kinds of things that perhaps that could be why, if you want to explain it. But I don't know, man. There was a lot of kids. Every time we would go see a Star Wars movie, there were a lot of kids there. Yeah,
but I mean, like, you honestly really saw more of the adults cosplaying more so than kids.
Well,
a lot of times. And I mean, I do kind of get it, though. It's like, I kind of, you don't hear, because kids are really like excited about Marvel, like the whole MCU universe, with that.
Yeah.
And I get it because, like you said, it's a little bit more
Well, it's got the source material,
The source material, but it's also just like the
marketing.
The marketing and the type of heroes that you have where, you're having this whole new trilogy. A lot of these kids don't even know where this stuff originated from. So, I mean, it's kind of like...
Well, the funny thing is the kids are still latching onto the original trilogy. Like, you ask some, 10-year-old, they're probably going to know Han, Luke, and Leia more than they're going to know Kylo, Rey, and Finn. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's kind of like if you didn't grow up with Star Wars as far as the original trilogy, or at least the prequel trilogy. Like, if you're a kid just starting out learning about Star Wars today... Like you can follow the story, but it doesn't always make a whole lot of sense to you because there's elements and there are people there that you don't really understand what's their purpose of being.
Well, and that's the thing. It's right, like you said, because it's somewhat of a linear storyline. Mm-hmm. You do almost have to start. I mean, obviously we had that whole podcast where we talked about what the best order is
to watch.
Watch them, but. That aside, you definitely can't start with 7, 8, and 9. I mean, you have to have...
Yeah.
and that's what parents were doing. They were actually showing their kids, before 7 came out, they were showing their kids...
The original trilogy.
Yeah, the original trilogy or the prequels or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then basically catching them up.
Right.
But look, I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing as long as they're not trying to market it towards kids and it's failing... Because Lord of the Rings wasn't marketed to kids, but it did just fine. It's like, I think that Star Wars has one of those fan bases that it has enough of a core fan base that fan base can then expand the fan base without necessarily depending on kids wanting the toys in order for the movie to be successful. Mm-hmm. That was something that George Lucas basically started that nobody had ever done. Tying in toys with movies that had never been done before. Mm-hmm. And it worked.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Well, what do you guys think? Do you think it's not connecting with younger fans? Or do you think that it is and they don't have all the variables? Or do you think maybe it's not connecting with younger fans, but maybe you agree with us as to the reasons, or maybe you have different reasons? Let us know in the comment section. At Head to Head SW on Facebook and Twitter. All right, what do we got next?
All right. So there are a lot of rumors floating around that JJ is taking things from the original expanded universe and trying to put it in the Rise of Skywalker. My question to you is, should he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if a lot of that's true, I definitely would agree with that, because one of the things that I've always thought was the fact that Disney should borrow from that, because there's already this rich history of what happens after Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. And because Lucasfilm licensed all this stuff and basically got all these authors to, essentially write all these books about it, it's not like this was fan fiction. A lot of the stuff, granted, wasn't canonized. George Lucas himself was a little bit picky about what he let into canon, but look, Lucas himself borrowed from the expanded universe for the prequel trilogy. He put Quinlan Vos in there. Quinlan Vos was an expanded universe guy. He did change the story of Boba Fett a little bit, but he brought all kinds, like Coruscant was not originally called that. That was an expanded universe concept. It's called something else. I was just watching something on YouTube the other day, a couple of days ago, in fact, that somebody did this YouTube video. I wish I remember what it was. I'll try to find it and put it in the show notes. But this guy basically is doing this continuing series. I think it's Star Wars Theory. I think that's the channel that's doing it. It's either Star Wars Theory or Star Wars Explained, one of those two. I'm pretty sure it's Theory. And what they did was they got a hold of the original script of when it was called Revenge of the Jedi and was talking about all the stuff that Lucas had in his original script, which was fun because I remembered a lot of that stuff. Coruscant was called something else, and the Emperor's throne room or whatever was on this volcanic thing, and there was a lava pool that was in front of his throne and all that. I mean, there was a lot of different cool stuff, all kinds of differences. So a lot of things Lucas himself borrowed from the expanded universe.
Yeah, I mean, they even were talking about, like, I guess in this expanded universe, there's, I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's like force floating or something like that. And I hear that that's supposed to be in Rise of Skywalker, where you can kind of use the force and go back through time and kind of see visions. And I think that's kind of what they were hinting at.
I don't know if I ever remember that in any of the books. Now, granted, I read quite a few of the expanded universe books, but they were pumping those things out so quick. There was no way I could keep up with them. Mm-hmm. But, you know, as far as should they put the stuff in the Rise of Skywalker, absolutely, because there was a lot of really cool concepts. And here's my point. Fans actually became invested in those concepts. So on one hand, Disney throwing away the canon that was created in what is now Legends, but what was the expanded universe, made sense because the expanded universe was really all over the place. Mm-hmm. Because people could just go up to Lucas and go, well, I want to do this. And he would go, okay, that's cool, but, oh, yeah, you can't do that with Yoda. You have to change that little plot line, but the rest of the story's okay. So they could basically do whatever they wanted. And what would happen is you had the story group and you had the other authors, and what they would do is they would read each other's stuff, or they would actually ask them, because Timothy Zahn was basically the anchor of the expanded universe.
Yeah.
They would call him up and say, hey, man, you know, we want to borrow the character of Mara Jade for our story. And here's what we want to do. Mm-hmm. And he would, first of all, he would grant us permission. And then second, he would
ask Lucas.
You know, well, he would basically also give them guidance, you know, if they had any questions. So there was kind of a loose community between the authors, at least as far as they were trying to honor each other's stories. But still, a lot of things got convoluted because they would finish a story arc and then they would retcon that story arc down the line. And then, of course, when the whole Yuuzhan Vong thing came up, that thing went over such a long period of time and everything. And then you had, you know, major things like the death of Chewbacca. So it's sort of like if you were writing something that took place after that timeline, and that was crazy anyway, because the whole universe was like in a complete disarray when that series ended.
Yeah.
So a lot of writers were forced to almost go into prequel mode and go, okay, this is kind of like before the whole Yuuzhan Vong crisis. So they really started painting themselves into a corner. So in that standpoint, I think Disney did the right thing. But where I think that Disney actually somewhat dropped the ball was the fact that they should have incorporated elements of the expanded universe, not throw away the whole thing. But you're getting that. Thrawn, right? We got Thrawn in Rebels. Then Timothy Zahn is now writing his new Thrawn trilogy. Well, he's written it, actually.
I wonder what if that would be cool if that's the new Rian Johnson trilogy. Yeah. I wonder what that would be.
Well, and I honestly think that Rian Johnson could actually do a pretty good job with that. I'm probably going to get shot for saying that, but, you know, that's something that I think he's familiar enough that he could anchor that trilogy, especially when you read all the stuff that's going on in these Thrawn books. Mm-hmm. There's a whole nother storyline they could tell. You know, so in fact, there's this alien race in there called the Grisks, and they're kind of being set up to be the new Yuuzhan Vong. I'm really curious to see what happens in Treason, because, you know, that's my theory. And I've actually read that a lot of other fans have actually been thinking the same thing. And now that Treason's out, we can see for sure. What about you guys? You think that should JJ actually borrow from the expanded universe? Do you basically think like Kylo, let the past die? You know, what are you guys thinking out there? Let us know at Head to Head SW and Facebook and Twitter. And Instagram. I always forget about Instagram, but I love Instagram. And Sith Talkers.
Do it for the gram.
Those guys, you know, they've invited us to be a part of their show, or we can be a guest on theirs or something.
Awesome.
So, you know, because I had mentioned in the solo podcast I did about, the importance of all of us Star Wars fans and Star Wars podcasters actually sticking together.
Yeah.
So, those guys, though, they post a lot of stuff like every day on Instagram, and they post a lot of really cool pictures, a lot of them hilarious, too. Like, they find all the great memes. So big shout out to Sith Talkers. You guys are my Instagram heroes. All right, what do we got next?
All right. So do you feel like this new trilogy was rushed? And possibly, my thoughts are it should be kind of been spread out more into a 6-movie series. What do you think?
Well, I mean, you could say that, but then again, you can make that same argument for the original trilogy, too.
I wouldn't say that for the original trilogy because the original trilogy was it. I mean, it was kind of...
Yeah, but I mean, if you just look at the structure, though, right? So, and everybody yaps about the fact that The Force Awakens is practically like a rewrite of A New Hope. Mm-hmm. Okay. The Last Jedi basically hit the same beats as, Empire Strikes Back, and presumably, I mean, this isn't going to be like exact, but it'll probably hit the same beats. But where I think that this argument is coming from is the fact that we have so much backstory on all these people that people want, I guess, more backstory.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least my whole philosophy on it is...
Yeah, you came up with this. Was this based on some personal thing, or?
Well, I mean, it was kind of a conversation that I kind of heard, and then I kind of started thinking about it, and then it kind of evolved into this. But like,
then it became a topic on our podcast.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'll just ask Eric about it,
and we'll put it out there in the universe.
Yep. So, and the reason why I disagree as far as like, yes, the original trilogy was it, but that's because everything was new. But now, and of course,
you're dealing with... That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's true, and it's not even really so much of a disagreement. It's more like the circumstances are different. Mm-hmm. All I'm pointing out is the fact that if you look at the sequel trilogy and the original trilogy, the pace at which they're moving the story along is pretty much the same. The only difference is, like you said, with the original trilogy, that was all we had. Mm-hmm. But now we had the original trilogy, we had the prequels, we had these standalones, we have all the animated stuff. I mean, we just had this rich treasure trove of knowledge. And it's sort of like you almost want more backstory. Like a good example would be the whole Kylo Ren, turning into Kylo Ren from Ben Solo. It's almost like I think there's an art. I haven't really personally read this, but I'm sure somebody out there thinks that maybe 7 should have started with that. Yeah,
like that's where I was kind of going with it, is that like I think because you're trying to pass the baton, I think the baton passing was too quick. So I'm thinking like, okay.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
So what I'm saying is like, okay, let the first 3 movies kind of show like, all right, what happened with Luke and not Luke, but with Han and Leia. And then we could kind of see, okay, that whole failure that Luke kind of experienced with Kylo. Now we can see where Snoke came from, how he kind of seduced Kylo.
Well, I think that's more what George Lucas wanted to do. Well, before he got like this really crazy idea, but some of the outlines that he had basically had a little bit of a slower pace. Now, what I think, if we're going to go along this line of discussion, is that what they should have done was pretty much similar to what you're saying, where they actually have Han, Luke, and Leia almost, had their own thing, and it progresses slower. And I think they would have done that if they were younger. Like if this sequel trilogy had been made in, say, the 90s or early 2000s, mm-hmm. I think that might have been the case.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, you could just give us a little, because I feel like, now they're so anxious of trying to, and I get it, like, they barely have time. Look at Carrie Fisher died in the middle, in the middle of this trilogy. It's like, we better, put the hurry this thing up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, in this sense of like, you're trying to hurry up and get Rey and Finn and everybody to this level, to this point, where it's kind of like, okay, there's still, and that's why I think that's why the Star Wars fans have so many questions.
Is it almost like a Batman syndrome where it's like on one hand you're trying to tie up the original trilogy people, but then on the other hand you're trying to introduce these new characters?
Yeah, and then on top of that, like, you know, you're taking things away from the fans, and I think you would have had a time to flush everything out and actually had a plan. So, like, if you decided, because, you know, everybody wanted to see Luke fight. Like, everybody so, like, okay, if you have this whole situation where, let's say in the second movie, that's where Kylo decides to, you know, he's getting drawn by the dark side. He goes up against Luke. You know, there's
you know
battle.
what they could have done?
You know,
they could have flip-flopped it. So they could have introduced... So you know how basically we had the new characters of the focus, and then as sort of a background or subplot, you had the original trilogy, and the original trilogy characters are kind of bridging the gap or something and ushering us into this new thing. Well, they could have flip-flopped that, where the little minor storylines are the new characters. Like, we're being introduced to them, but we're not focused on them. Mm-hmm. You know, we're focused, like, for instance, the whole Ben Solo thing and him, you know, being trained and turning against Luke, or, you know, how that happened. But the focus is still the original trilogy guys.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is that you get to see how their story ends, and you're in the background, you're seeing how these newer characters,
how Poe is starting to take charge and lead the new
starting and,
exactly. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, now you have
and
more
then a
development.
Theoretical 10, 11, and 12 could then focus on their adventures.
Yeah, and then now you can actually do it where, like, okay, let's say in the last movie, you know, okay, that's when Kylo kills Han. You know, Luke decides to go into hiding or whatever, and then...
You know what they should have done?
You know, then you could do that. So now when you have the quote-unquote Force Awakens, and now like, it all makes a little bit more sense to people. And people can
here's
see
what they could have done, and this would have been hilarious. They could have done to the new generation what they did to my generation. So, like in 2015, start with episode 10. And everybody's like, what? And now 7, 8, and 9 becomes the prequel trilogy, and that becomes that explains how I got to it. See, that's what they could have done.
Yeah, I guess you want to keep everything, you know.
I mean, if you
have that Star Wars vibe,
you
all the
really
way.
want to have that vibe, and you really want to hit those beats, that's what you got to do. But I don't know. We'll see. Well, what about you guys? You think that did they rush the trilogy? You know, should this have been a 6-movie series? Bonus question, should they have started with 10, 11, and 12 and then done 7, 8, 9 like the prequels? But and then 7, 8, 9 could have been all right, I'll stop. You know, let us know. But alas, it is time for us to leave the cantina.
Yes.
It was a fun round, good round of overall discussion, I think, but we have to leave the cantina and head to the battlefield. What do we got next?
Our next segment is Duel of the Fates. All right. So this week, my question is, who do you think was the more powerful Jedi? Luke in Return of the Jedi or Anakin in Revenge of the Sith?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking that this has got to be like something that you've got up your sleeve, because the answer to me is painfully obviously Anakin. I mean, here you have a guy who is at the zenith of his power. He's been a trained Jedi from the time he was a kid. Mm-hmm. He's completely mastered the Force. And on top of that, on top of being just an absolute expert duelist, and the fact that his Force powers are insane, you know, and he's channeling the dark side and the light side in that, hands down. Not to mention the fact, if you want any other evidence, there's no way that Luke could have stood against Anakin Obi-Wan in that duel from Revenge of the Sith. He would have had his little Jedi in wannabe butt handed to him. Because he wasn't that trained. So if he was fighting Obi-Wan or if he was fighting Anakin, either one, because both those guys were fairly evenly matched in Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like, you know, they're using a combination of Force powers. They're doing stuff. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, Luke was pretty powerful. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he didn't have he had some of the full training, but he was still pretty new to it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to go even an extra thing, because a lot of the things that you and I use to defend Luke is that, well, he's the grandson of the Force. Well, Anakin's the son of the Force.
Right.
And he's still Anakin. Now, if this had been a Vader, thing, and that's another thing, too. Like, Vader, granted, this is going back a ways, so it's going off scope. But, I mean, Vader beat him fairly easily in Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, even in Return of the Jedi, yes, he had to fight him a little bit harder. But even then, and that's also tough to say, too, because this should actually be a future Duel of the Fates for us, is who's more powerful, say Empire Strikes Back Vader versus Revenge of the Sith Anakin. Because Vader's command of the dark side was just so ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, well, going back to Luke and
like this
Anakin.
Week's actual.
Because now you already got my mind going.
Yeah, you're kind of like, oh, that's good, actually.
But like between Luke and
no dessert
Anakin,
till you finish your dinner, young man.
I think that, I don't know, because like on one hand, I think it's all about, it's kind of hard because it's like on one hand you do have like to think about training versus the will of the Force, and it's kind of like,
right.
You have looking at from this perspective. Okay. Yes. Anakin had more time to train and study, and he was there with all these Jedi masters. I mean, he's around Mace Windu, Yoda, like actually around these guys. And then he's
he studied the text. He took all the quizzes and tests in the classroom. And
he went to the ACT.
All the battles that he faced.
Yeah, so he's definitely like,
because you bring up a good point too. Don't forget the whole Clone Wars series happened before all this.
Exactly. So and that was his proving grounds, basically.
Yeah, look at what kind of pilot he was in Revenge of the Sith.
And then of course, he did Best Dooku. So
Exactly.
You have that. But you have to also kind of like wonder, and this is my thing, is that like Palpatine was so obsessed with Luke, like, and getting him to the dark side. And it's like, I think that he felt like Luke was more powerful than Vader.
Well, there's a in-universe and a Lucas explanation, which actually match, because Lucas kind of wanted this to appear in some of the novelizations. The whole reason that he wanted Luke so bad was because Luke was the offspring of Anakin. So he still had that, like, paternal connection to the Force kind of thing. Mm-hmm. See, he wouldn't have felt that way if Anakin hadn't messed himself up and become Vader.
You mean as far as getting his limbs cut off?
Yeah.
Anything like that?
Because that was one of the things that it was like, oh, great. I mean, they were even, if you remember, they talked about that even in the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, that the Emperor's like, oh, great. My entire plan, is like basically like destroyed before it even gets started. So what it is that he realized, okay, this guy's got that whole Skywalker Force connection going, but he's like a whole guy. So I can train him up. He could be
the new me, baby.
Pretty much, yeah. And, don't even forget, too, that, because Anakin was so powerful. I mean, the Emperor even said himself when he was dueling Yoda, like, well, this kid's going to be more powerful than either one of us. Mm-hmm. And he would have been had he been able to continue on as Anakin Skywalker and not Vader.
But do you really, but see, that's always makes me wonder, because, we've always talked about, like, the midichlorians and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, we hated that explanation for as far as strength in the Force or whatnot. So my thing is like, why does him losing limbs matter? Because
it was the Force goes through the living. When you don't have that much living tissue, this is something that Lucas actually explained in his commentaries. When you don't have that much living tissue, you don't have as much of a connection with the Force. Actually, that's one of the reasons why everybody talks about how powerful Vader is. Because in spite of the fact, it's almost like, look how powerful he was, even though his potential for Force power was diminished. It was sort of like Lucas had created this whole thing, and, you know, people have reprinted it since and everything, but it was basically one of these things where, so Vader was second only to the Emperor as far as power goes, but had he not been Vader and continued on as Anakin, but as a Sith, he would have been way more powerful.
Honestly, I don't even think that's really the honest reason, though, because if you go by that logic, okay, look at Yoda. Yoda's only like 2 feet tall, but he's super powerful. So it was just like, he doesn't have that much more body than Vader at that time. I mean,
yeah, but that's for his species, though. You know, it's kind of like
maybe, but I mean, like, my thing is, I think that what held Anakin back is that's what ticked the Emperor off so much, was the fact that he knew that Anakin was still inside Vader. He did not completely let that go.
Well, and I think the dark side, yeah. But then again, when you're reading all this stuff, and like I said, a lot of this stuff is canon now. Again, that was Lucas's explanation himself.
Well, he's wrong.
I mean, that's basically what he said. Now, the new version is pretty similar, but it's still the same thing, that he's partially mechanical. But I mean, he's pretty, even in the Thrawn Alliance novel that I'm reading, it's like, Alliances basically points out several times about how, because, you know, I mean, Thrawn is kind of throwing a little shade. Like, every once in a while, he'll basically throw something out there like, I know you're Anakin Skywalker kind of thing. That just infuriates Vader. But there are times where, like, he'll flash back or whatever. But he pretty much, I think a lot of what they were doing in New Canon was trying to explain why Luke actually could still feel good in him, and why Obi-Wan did too. You know, like you said, it was like probably 99% crushed, but there's that 1% that was still Anakin Skywalker in there. But a lot of it has to do with, the mechanical thing was what diminished him.
Well, I mean,
that was just an in-universe explanation.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it. It makes sense, but in the way it doesn't, because I'm thinking, like, yes, the Force is in all living things, and, you know, it surrounds us, binds us, you know, all that. But like I said,
the other thing too is, like you were saying too, you know, with the training, it's like, okay, so I don't have any, you know, so say I got a mechanical arm, and like, here's a good argument for what you're talking about. When he got his arm hacked off by Dooku, it certainly didn't diminish his power then. You know, but then again, he was sort of decayed and stuff like that, and it, you know, he was never able to reach his full potential at that point. But I honestly think, and this is where it supports your whole Yoda thing, is that Vader went from more like a combat specialist to more of a Force power specialist. So Anakin was more about like a well-rounded, super powerful. He was mastering a lot of different things. Vader physically was diminished, so he had to count, much like how Yoda does.
He had to compensate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a compensation. So he got really powerful and like these, crazy Force powers, even though
he could still, because
he learned
Rogue
Duel.
I mean,
well,
then even the whole
Vader comic series and stuff. I mean, he was putting down some folks.
Yeah. But then again, there weren't really a whole lot of, I mean, he's going against common people, though.
Oh, but going back to your Will of the Force argument, though, too, you can't really compare that in this Duel of the Fates, simply because the Will of the Force was swinging toward the dark side in the prequel trilogy, so Anakin, the Will of the Force was more on his side at that point.
Well, actually, we'd be diminishing it, though, because if it was going dark, then the Jedi, you know what I'm saying? If he's
well, at which point are you so here's the thing that we have to like look at too, because for like 10 minutes
of the
movie, 10 minutes of the movie, he's actually a
Jedi,
non-mechanical Darth Vader too. You know, don't forget, at the end of that whole end of the movie, he is Darth Vader, but he's kind of like he's Anakin with yellow eyes, basically.
Yeah.
You know? But he really was Darth Vader. Like Darth Vader.
Oh, I mean, after like he.
Yeah, when he said, "Okay, you know, I'll do whatever you ask," and
yep,
you know all that stuff, and it's like Darth Vader, like he was just coming up with that, you know, like
he got to go in to start killing younglings and everything like that.
Exactly, and then when he went to oh man,
Mustafar?
Yeah, but what was the name of that guy that?
Oh, Newt Gunray?
Yeah, that's it, Newt Gunray. For some reason, like my mind blanked.
Trust me, I understand.
Yeah, like when he went after him and the rest of those Trade Federation guys and stuff, and all the, you know, some of the separatists and everything. It's just like, yeah, he was actually Darth Vader at that point.
True.
You know, he wasn't Anakin Skywalker, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if he had continued on, that's what Darth Vader would have been. Although, thankfully, he got himself, you know, sliced up, because then he got the really super cool outfit. And
yep. Booming voice.
Yeah, the booming voice. Exactly.
It's like Barry White meets the Terminator.
I mean, can you imagine, you know, him whining, but as like the James Earl Jones voice?
Nobody. Well, actually, they had some video about that. No one wants to play with me.
Oh, yeah.
But
hit
yeah,
the sand, it gets everywhere. You know, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. That's really tough to say, but it's almost like we've actually drifted more into Anakin versus Anakin in that sense, because you have all these different points. But I would still go with the same answer, though, even if you're talking about earlier in the film.
Yeah, I mean,
you did say Revenge of the Sith, but even look, right out the gate, man, that first scene where he's like flying around in the starfighter all amazingly, and then jumping out of the cockpit and instantly slicing up droids, and then going after Dooku. And
so I think Anakin wins this round.
Yeah, I think so. What about you guys? Luke Return of the Jedi versus Anakin Revenge of the Sith. Early Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
Pre-Vader. Who is the better Jedi? Let us know at HeadToHeadSW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Put together a really cool like photo for us. All right, what do we got next?
All right, next we have From a Certain Point of View. So this week, I just got some awesome news. So D23 is coming up, and they've already announced that the first day of D23, they're going to release the second trailer for Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, see, that's weird, because as early as, because I remember it's funny that you brought it up, because I was looking it up the other day. Yeah, like yesterday. Keep in mind, this is from one day ago. And there was still the news outlets reporting that October was when we were going to see the next trailer, and, you know, when, but that's like all these experts had said. So they actually announced it, huh? Because I missed the announcement that they were going to do it at D23.
Yeah, that they said day one of D23, because I guess they're going to be talking about, of course, Rise of Skywalker. They're going to talk about The Mandalorian, Clone Wars, Season 7. What else? And possibly some other...
It's really weird that it's so Star Wars heavy when they had Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah, I know. But, you know, I think because Disney being such, well, Star Wars being such a big property in Disney, of course, that's kind of like the buzz right now.
They need to make sure it makes some cash.
Yeah, and I think that's what their big thing is. Like, okay, we really, because I think they are concerned about what happened with Solo. Because Solo...
Well, it's like, quit screwing up the...
Yeah, I know.
Franchise, and it's like at this point, man, it's like just get Lucas back. I mean, I can't believe that, but there's a lot of people that are saying just let him take control of it again, or at least guide it.
Yeah, but I think
he's too busy. I just read that he's buying stock in J.P. Morgan.
Wow,
it's like, oh my goodness, dude, he does that. He's gonna make even.
Yeah, George is busy.
No, everybody forgets that George has some, quite a bit of stock in Disney.
Yes.
So he's got some ownership there.
Yeah. But, I mean, I've heard that we're going to get, in this new trailer, we're going to see more of the Death Star. We're going to see
So they actually released like a bunch of
because
like what we're going to see.
Yeah, the other thing is they
wait, when is D23?
August 23rd.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew it was August, but I'm like, well, wait a minute. We're
August
kind of
23rd.
moving through August a little bit.
Yeah, August 23rd is when day one, opening day of D23, and we're supposed to get the synopsis of.
Man, I hope so. Actually, you know what?
Skywalker.
That's around the time we're recording our next
podcast.
Well, yeah, our next round.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that would be.
I guess we're gonna probably the trailer. So right now it's kind of like the big news about trailer 2, but that week, so that would be Monday the 26th or 5th or whatever it is. Yeah, 6th, because 18th, my birthday is on a Sunday this year. So, yep. So the episode
Shameless
that
plug.
airs on the 26th is probably going to be us maybe doing a trailer breakdown.
Yeah, that's if everything holds true.
Yeah,
man.
that's if it really happens.
But yeah, they're basically talking about the First Order has this these new super weapons called the Annihilators. Sounds like a hockey team or something like that.
It was the name of my bowling team.
Oh yeah,
but we didn't. Actually, I think that was probably other than this past season, when we called ourselves the Annihilators, it was like one of the worst seasons. We're like, yeah, we got to no more of that name.
That name no longer has
any meaning. Exactly.
But yeah, so they're supposed to have these super weapons where like they're like these cannons that can like pick stuff off the surface of planets and stuff like that. So it's not quite like the Death Star, which is cool because I mean, quite frankly, like you kind of set the bar with the Death Star. Quite honestly, it's like after that, like what do you really do? You know, I mean, they already tried the whole Star Killer base, so you can't really redo that again. But
well, and it gets to the point too where if you get anything more powerful than that, it's like, well, how are you gonna? What are you going to do?
Exactly. What's more powerful than that, frankly. But then I
almost wish that they would borrow the Sun Killer, though, from the expanded universe. Mm-hmm. That was kind of cool.
But they also said, like, the last shot of this trailer apparently is going to, like, have everybody just, like, going nuts.
Oh, the last shot of the trailer.
The trailer.
This is kind of like a theme, because remember when JJ was telling Kevin Smith, like, the last shot of the movie is just going to, like, melt your mind or something?
Yeah. Well, they say there's going to be a lot of those moments in this. Even,
well, I know Domhnall Gleeson was talking about how he was actually surprised when he read the script. Mm-hmm. That I read, too. Actually, our friends over at Jedi Council covered that on their show this week. Yeah. Or this past Thursday.
And so there's supposed to be a lot more that we're going to see. Like I said, in this trailer, we're going to see more of the Emperor's thing. And I think it's going to really just it's going to be a darker part of the film that we're going to see. So I think it's really going to be interesting. I can't wait to see it. Some people feel like it's too early to release a second trailer because the first one came out in April when we Star Wars Celebration.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, think about it. It's like stupid things coming out in December.
Yeah. So some people feel like, okay, we shouldn't get the second trailer until like
tell you this
September or October.
Well, here's the thing, in my opinion, anyway. Mm-hmm. It's like I don't think trailer number 2 is too early. I think trailer number 1 was a little too late. I think number 1 should have been released in February, like Super Bowl. Yeah, well, that's something they should have done. Yeah, true. They should have done the Super Bowl. Then they could have given us the teaser for The Mandalorian.
But do you think that? But see, because of Disney's properties with Endgame, though.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing that they do have to weigh. Yeah. But look, here's the thing, and this is what people always seem to forget. A lot of people, at least with the saga films, a lot of even the casual fans keep up with those. I don't think it's going to be detrimental. People are going to see Star Wars. People know the Rise of Skywalker is coming out this year. Mm-hmm. Whether they have a trailer in August or October, I don't think it matters. Yeah. In fact, I think it's smarter to do it in August because you don't want to do the whole Solo thing to where, of course, with Solo, we didn't get anything until like a month before the movie was released or something. Right.
But I think with this, though, I think it's great because some people feel like, you know, if you let if you show too much, because then it's like, okay, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Now
you trailers like spoilers.
Yeah, because now it's like, okay, well, what are you going to show the closer you get to the movie?
Hey, maybe they'll do a Rogue One on us and show us a bunch of crap that's not even in the movie.
Yeah, but I just think that
it's like, I want to see the movie that, you know, that the original Rogue One trailer was. It's like, well, make another movie out of that footage.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just think that, you know, and that's where it comes down to the marketing thing. And I think that's where, honestly, Disney has failed so much, is that knowing how to market their properties correctly, because
the problem is they got
too much stuff.
Yeah,
they got too much, and it's like you don't know how to juggle. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that you don't know when to drop the right trailer at the right time. I mean, so far with the Marvel thing, it's been spot on. But with Star Wars, it's been kind of hit and miss.
Well,
like with
Star
Force
Wars
Awakens
is a
was
different
fine.
type of thing. You know, because Star Wars is somewhat of a, you know, let's face it, they were a bunch of independent films. It's not, you know, Marvel is a comic book based thing. So once they established it, and then, of course, you know, Kevin Feige is quite a different studio head than, say, Kathleen Kennedy is. She's a wonderful Dynamite producer, but maybe as a studio head, you know, maybe, well, that's why whoever this, I forgot the name of this new woman that's in charge of it now, that vice presidential position that they created.
For what?
For Lucasfilm to run the day-to-day thing. They put that woman basically in charge of the whole story thing, and, you know, how the movies and stuff were going to move forward. So that way Kathleen can just basically concentrate on running the studio and not have to deal with the minutia of some of the properties. So she basically, this new woman has the control over Star Wars, and I think maybe Indiana Jones or some other one. I don't remember what it was. Whatever it is, because, you know, we heavily research here at our podcast. You know, it's one of those things where I think that the marketing plays into a lot of that. Yeah. And they do definitely need to get a handle on that. They need to understand. See, the problem is I don't think they understand their own property.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's my point, is that
like they inherited Star Wars, but they don't get it because it came from the mind of Lucas. You know, Lucas, as dumb as he could be with some of his decisions, marketing was never a problem for him.
Oh, no.
You know, he was like, okay, directing, yeah, hit and miss.
Questionable.
Yeah, you know, definitely directing actors.
Yeah.
You know, writing, hit and miss. Storytelling, amazing. Marketing, even more amazing.
Yep.
And that's why I think that, you know, Lucasfilm used to be an independent studio. The problem is, when Disney inherited it, they're trying to treat it like it's like one of these big, major Hollywood studios, and it's not. That's not how it
Fox
thrives.
Or anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And they can't do that, and that's the problem. And I think that's why they're running into all these other issues. Yeah. But who knows? We could be wrong. Yeah. You guys might be listening to this going, man, these guys are like... But if you do...
At least you're listening.
Yes, at least you're listening, so negative criticism is fine. Leave a comment.
Yes.
At Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. All right, well, that was a good discussion. But now it is time to get rid of all these hostile feelings. It is time to clear your mind. That's right. This is where we take your questions and attempt to answer them. What was our first one?
First question comes from John McCormick. He asked the question, I'm starting to feel in the Force that Rey is Kylo's sister. What do your feelings tell you?
So, you have a sister.
Right.
Yeah, for some reason my voice isn't going too deep today. Always happens to me when we record these podcasts. Like, I'll have this like total radio voice if I'm just, you know, back working or something, and then we do these podcasts and it's like my voice jumps up a couple octaves.
Gotta retune it.
Yeah, exactly. See, I need one of those Vader voice boxes. But I don't...
We should get a plug-in for this thing.
I can understand why John feels this way. John, I hear you, buddy, but I don't think they're going to go that route. Honestly. Not because of the fact that that would be derivative, because I don't necessarily think that that would stop them if they felt like like an overwhelming urge to take the story in that direction. But I just don't think that that's where they're going with it.
Well, I think that, there's been talks that because of their connection, like it seems that they have a stronger connection that's kind of odd outside of what Snoke did.
No, and I know. I get that, because in The Force Awakens, it was kind of like they could sense each other's fears, and, it was kind of like they were connected
already.
And sure, and that's where it looked like they were leading us. And, I'm hoping that was a JJ sleight of hand, like basically in Star Trek when he told us Khan wasn't into darkness and he was the big enemy.
Star Trek fans has never let that go.
Yeah, and it's... because he out and out lied to everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to use misdirection, but when you out and out lie to your fans, and he's done that a couple of times in Star Wars, actually. So I wouldn't put that past him, that he put that in there, because remember, he did The Force Awakens. So if he put that in there to just plant that seed, and then he's going to turn it on, on its head in the next movie, because obviously he's doing 7 and 9, but not 8. We'll see. Because when Kylo, another thing that they actually like to use for that is that Kylo knew about her parents. Like, well, how do you know about her parents? So the thing is, if they were brother and sister, that means that she would have to be the daughter of Leia and Solo. Right.
Which some people have speculated that, like, when Han left, Leia had another child. And because they always kept saying that, like, Leia, the way Leia looks at Rey is a little...
Yeah, and I'm like, well... I could get that. I mean, hey, maybe she is Luke's kid, and maybe they just decided, hey, remember that back in Empire when we were... Yep. Let's not let the brother-sister thing stop us. Let's just do it. But that aside...
Now that's the
honestly,
dark side, man.
Yeah. Well, that's why, the old Jedi thing, and that's why Kylo, I mean, it fits, but the problem is that I don't think that Kylo is lying when he was talking about how, your whole parents are junk traders and they're nobodies and stuff like that. I think that, honestly, that's what he really believes. That's what he's probably been told. That's what, I don't think that he's, like, tricking her or using misdirection or anything like that. I think he honestly believes that.
Yeah, and sold her off a drink. And it could be Han. It could be like that could be one of her parents. And because, like I said, both of them, like, were depressed based off of whatever was going on with them in their marriage. And that's why Han went back to doing what he knew and Leia went back to doing what she knew. And so, maybe at that time they were on some mission and they were acting as junk traders or something like that. Great is like, well,
it wouldn't be, but it would be great if she had the affair with Lando. I mean, that groundwork was being laid in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I think Rey would be a different hero.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. She would be, hey, but it might work different in the physics of that universe. Who knows?
Yeah, the Force just knocks out certain genes.
Yeah, that, or you find out, like, the Emperor is like her. Hey, that's another thing, too. Well, a lot of the real speculation is that she's either a clone or she's Palpatine's offspring or... I mean, the fact that she was created in the Force, I could hang with that because that would explain how she could just naturally do all this stuff. Yeah. Like at this high level with virtually no training. In fact, I almost hope that that's the case. All right, what do we got next?
Next question comes from Salim Makura.
And congratulations on...
Hey, I'm trying. I have heard rumors of... Oh, okay, so I kind of...
Oh, this is...
I have heard rumors about Force flow being in the Rise of Skywalker. I'm excited to see that on the big screen. What about you?
So, just to review, are they talking about time travel? Well, this is like, I've read all these expanded universe books. I don't remember it being called that.
Well, I kind of, when I saw the question, I kind of,
Did you look it up?
Yeah, and they were basically talking about Force flow was kind of...
like
almost
rapping style or something. It's got Force flow.
I should do that. I should drop an album called Force Flow.
There you go.
But so you remember that episode of Rebels when they were kind of like going through those different portals in time?
Yeah, that's the World Between Worlds.
World Between Worlds, yeah. Okay, so it's kind of something like that where in the Force, basically, like they basically said like Rey and Kylo have this connection where they both, since they're connected in the Force anyway, they can kind of put their powers together, so to speak, and travel in time. And they were seeing events that happened, like the Luke and Vader duel on Bespin. You had the
almost like kind of her vision, because basically,
basically like her vision.
Seeing.
Yeah, it's basically her vision, but it's like but now you actually can kind of like see how everything unfolded beforehand.
Just ask R2.
That's what. Well, we had that whole conversation already, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they don't.
They don't know that, right? But yeah.
And again, though, I mean, not to digress too much, but really, it's not like they don't know that R2, at the very least, belonged to Luke for so many years.
Well, I don't think anyone knows that but Leia, really.
Well, maybe not. I mean, Han did.
Well, Han's gone.
Chewbacca did. Lando did.
Well, he might bring it back. I mean, at some point.
And it wouldn't, it's really not, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge.
And maybe that's where, I mean, honestly, like we talked about, like in our whole R2 conversation, that maybe this is when he comes back and kind of, hey, look, here's all I got. Like, here's everything you need. Download it from, I downloaded this to your space PDA.
Yeah, exactly.
And
here's a big PDF document of like everything.
It's a bunch of YouTube clips or something like that. You can just watch this at your leisure and kind of figure out what's
crazy, but well, I mean, we'll just have to see, because I don't know. The problem with even the speculation of this, after the second trailer drops, I think we can make a lot more educated guesses, hypotheses, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, and they're actually
about what happened.
Synopsis too. So
so I mean, that's going to help quite a bit, because right now, man, we're just dropping everything in this studio today. Those were the earbuds. Yeah, well, at least none of that's good. And we left the Cantina a while ago.
Sometimes it hits you later.
Clearing the mind. We're clearing our table right now, everybody. So yeah, I mean, we'll know. We'll know a lot more, I think, after this trailer drops, and we'll be our speculation will be more educated guesses, and because right now the problem is, as far as will we see it? First of all,
yeah,
a lot of that depends on where they're going with the story and everything else, and of course, Salim is basically saying, "Look, I'm excited to see it on the big screen. Are you?" Well, the answer is yeah.
I'm excited to see anything Star Wars on the big screen.
That's the thing. I'm just excited to see 9. Now, am I truly excited about it? It depends on how they're going to do it and where they're going to take it. Rebels handled it really well, and I think conceptually it introduced somewhat of a more sci-fi kind of thing without really beating us over the head or doing it in a cliched way.
Well, honestly, I think we're going to get a whole lot of more spiritual stuff in this. At Rise of Skywalker.
Well, especially if they're ending the Jedi and the Sith.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a whole lot of mystic, spiritual stuff that's like, okay, where did this come from? How
just going into more of the Force ghosts and kind of dealing with some of the more ethereal, like, okay, yeah, because if you do have a Sith spirit, like let's say, I don't know, Palpatine comes in the form of like a Sith ghost. I mean, who knows? Who knows what they could be bringing out? So, if they spend a lot of time interacting with Force ghosts, Sith ghosts, whatever, then yeah, obviously we're going to get that other side realm. Because that's another thing too. Like, how are these ghosts able to just pop up wherever? Like, what are they doing when they're not popping up?
Exactly.
Maybe they're in the world between worlds. So, I don't know. But I think that's going to do it for our show this week. Don't forget to purchase some of the Thrawn books. We're going to have links to the entire trilogy in the show notes. Don't forget that next week we're actually going to finally do our Master and Apprentice review.
Yes.
It's finally going to happen, everybody. We're finally going to review this book. And, hopefully you guys get in on that. So we're going to, one more week, I'm going to put the link in the show notes. It's a page turner. You could theoretically get through it in a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. So you can you have the opportunity. If that's not really and we do highly recommend it. But you also have the links to the Thrawn books in there. So, lots of really good Star Wars reading for you guys this week. That's your homework. All right, well, that's going to do it, I think, for the show. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.